You're driving down a street you know well. You pass a Starbucks, you make a mental note. Coffee later. You drive another 4 blocks, there's another Starbucks. Exact same green logo, exact same store. You think, okay, that's a lot. You drive 2 more blocks, there's a third one. But that's the part most people never notice. That third Starbucks was put there on purpose, not by accident, not because the city ran out of ideas. Someone sat in a boardroom, looked at a map with 2 Starbucks already on it, and said, put another one right here. Howard Schultz, the man who built Starbucks into a global empire, once said something that sounds completely insane. We self-cannibalize at least a third of our stores every day. He knew his new stores were stealing customers from his own existing stores. He knew exactly what would happen and approved the expansion anyway. Why would the CEO of a $100 billion company deliberately destroy his own sales? He understood a pattern that's quietly shaped cities, businesses, and the way you shop for nearly a century. A rule so invisible that you've walked past evidence of it thousands of times and never noticed. By the end of this video, you will never look at a strip mall, a car dealership, or a city block the same way again. At first glance, the whole idea sounds ridiculous. Think about how you'd open a business if someone handed you $1 million and said, go find a location. Common sense says, go somewhere nobody else is. Find the gap in the market. Don't walk into a war. Set up shop somewhere quiet. Build your customer base. Own your territory. That logic sounds airtight. It's also almost completely wrong, and the proof is everywhere around you. Walk into any American city. The Walgreens is across the street from the CVS. The McDonald's is next door to the Burger King. The Home Depot is down the block from the Lowe's. The car dealerships aren't scattered. They're in rows, literally called auto rows and auto miles. Dozens of competitors selling the same product crammed onto the same half-mile of road. This is not a coincidence. This is not laziness. This is the most calculated move in business. And once you understand why it happens, you'll realize it's been shaping your life without your permission. There are 3 forces behind it. The first one goes back to 1929 and an economist most people have never heard of. The second one involves Starbucks doing something that, on paper, should have destroyed the company. And the third one is the reason that once a cluster starts, it almost never stops. In 1929, economist Harold Hotelling published a dry academic paper. On the surface, it looked forgettable, dense equations, technical language, and a boring title. But hidden inside was an idea that would eventually explain half of what you see when you drive through an American city. It is an idea that would eventually explain half of what you see when you drive through any American city. Picture the experiment. Imagine a beach, 1 mile long, perfectly straight. Customers are spread evenly across the entire beach, same number of people every 100 feet. Now imagine 2 ice cream vendors. They each have a cart. They can set up anywhere they want. Where do they go? The obvious answer, the answer everyone gives, is split the beach in half. 1 vendor at the quarter-mile mark, 1 at the 3/4-mile mark. Perfect coverage. Nobody has to walk more than a quarter-mile for ice cream. Efficient, logical, clean. But that's not what happens. This is where everything changes. Say vendor A is at the quarter-mile mark. Vendor B sets up at the midpoint, half a mile. Vendor B now owns everything from the midpoint to the far end of the beach, a huge chunk. Vendor A is nervous, so vendor A moves slightly toward the center. Now vendor B is nervous, so vendor B moves slightly toward the center. This keeps happening, each vendor inching toward the middle until both of them are standing almost exactly at the center of the beach, side by side, competing for the exact same customers. The people at the far ends of the beach have to walk almost a mile for ice cream. The system is less efficient. The vendors are making less money per customer because they're fighting over the same few feet of sand. Everyone lost. And yet, from each vendor's perspective, every move made perfect sense. That's Hotelling's law.
In a competitive market, the rational move for every individual player is to move toward the center, even when the collective result is a disaster. Neither vendor can afford to move away from the center without handing the entire middle market to the other one, so neither one leaves. They stay locked in place, trapped by the very logic that brought them there. And it's not just ice cream. Hoteling proved mathematically that this same dynamic plays out in any market where customers care about location. You see the same pattern with gas stations, pharmacies, fast food chains, airlines, even political campaigns, even the length of hot dogs. Yes, Hoteling wrote about that too. The center always wins. The center always pulls. But Starbucks took it one step further and clustered against themselves. By 2001, Starbucks already had over 4,000 locations in North America. They were growing at 3 to 4 new stores per day. The evidence is right there in Starbucks' SEC filing. This is word for word from their public financial documents. Starbucks has experienced a certain level of cannibalization of sales of existing stores by new stores as store concentration has increased. They were eating themselves, and their response was, "Good, keep going." Howard Schultz made the decision in the early 1990s. The logic was almost military. If you can't afford to advertise everywhere, make your presence so dense in certain areas that the brand becomes unavoidable. 4 Starbucks in 8 blocks in Washington, D.C.'s DuPont Circle. Starbucks across from Starbucks in Harvard Choir. Not because they didn't know, because they planned it. What Starbucks understood was surprisingly simple. When you walk past a Starbucks 3 times on your way to work, you don't need an ad. The store is the ad. The logo is the billboard. The line of people out the door at 8 a.m. is the social proof. Clustering made the brand so visible in certain zip codes that competitors couldn't get a foothold. By the time a local coffee shop opened, Starbucks had already trained the entire neighborhood's morning routine. But the real advantage was hidden behind the scenes. Starbucks built a system called Atlas, an internal AI mapping platform, specifically to calculate how much a new store would cannibalize an existing one. They weren't opening stores blindly. They were running models that predicted the exact revenue transfer between locations, and they opened the new store anyway because they calculated that the total new revenue from new customers who only came in because there was a location closer to their office exceeded what the existing store lost. They turned cannibalization into a science, and competitors couldn't copy this strategy cheaply. You can't out-saturate Starbucks in their own territory. By the time you figure out what they did, they've already done it to the next city. There's another reason these clusters keep growing. Car dealerships are the perfect example. Why does every American city have an auto mile? That one stretch of road with 15 dealerships in a row. Toyota next to Honda, next to Ford, next to Hyundai, all competing for the exact same customer who drove up looking to buy a car this weekend. The answer sounds counterintuitive. They cluster because it's better for the customer. When you're buying a $35,000 car, you're not making an impulse purchase. You're comparing models, taking test drives, and negotiating prices. The single dealership out on Route 9 in the middle of nowhere has a problem. Nobody makes a special trip to one dealer. But a cluster of 15 dealers on the same road, that becomes a destination. People plan a Saturday around going to Auto Row. The cluster creates traffic that no individual dealer could generate alone. Economists call this agglomeration, the idea that some businesses are worth more together than they are separately. The cluster generates more total customers than any single location could generate, and every business in the cluster benefits from the traffic the cluster creates. But once that cluster reaches critical mass, everything changes. It becomes almost impossible for a new entrant to locate anywhere else. Say a new Hyundai dealership opens in your city. Where do they go? Option 1, set up somewhere alone where land is cheap and try to pull customers out of their established Saturday routine. Good luck. Option 2, set up on Auto Row, pay more for the land, fight for the same customers, but at least those customers are actually showing up. Almost every dealer picks Option 2. And that's why auto rows don't shrink, they grow. Each new dealer that joins makes the cluster more powerful, which attracts more customers, which attracts more dealers. The gravity feeds itself. The National Automobile Association reported that the number of dealers owning 50 or more stores has doubled since 2016, not because the industry got more competitive, because scale and clustering became the only viable survival strategy. The lone dealership on the quiet road didn't disappear because it lost a price war. It disappeared because it lost the gravity war. The problem is that Hotelling's law doesn't work forever. Remember those two ice cream vendors on the beach? They ended up standing side by side in the center, both making less money than they should, both unable to move. That's not just inefficiency, that's a trap. No business can stay in that trap forever.
In 2022, Starbucks started closing stores, not because coffee got less popular, because their own clustering had finally caught up with them. By 2023, they had over 16,000 locations in the U.S. alone. The cannibalization they had weaponized in the 1990s had become a genuine problem. Stores were stealing from each other faster than new customers could fill the gap. The stock dropped, the CEO got replaced. The same strategy that built the empire started dismantling it. And this is the hidden lesson inside Hotelling's law that even most economists miss. Clustering works until it works too well. The moment every competitor is standing at the center of the beach, the center becomes the most expensive, most competitive, most exhausting place to be. And suddenly, the ends of the beach look interesting again. This is exactly what happened to fast food. McDonald's and Burger King spent decades clustering on the same intersections. Then Chick-fil-A showed up. They didn't follow the cluster, they went where the cluster wasn't. Suburban corridors, standalone locations with massive drive-thrus, areas the Big Two had written off as low traffic, and they built the most profitable fast food operation in America, more revenue per location than any other chain. Chick-fil-A figured out that once everyone is standing at the center of the beach, the ends of the beach become the most valuable real estate on the planet. But this isn't just about coffee shops anymore, because Hotelling didn't just predict where businesses would locate. He predicted where everything would converge. Political candidates. In every U.S. election cycle, both major candidates start their campaigns at opposite ends of the political spectrum, one hard left, one hard right. Then something strange happens as the general election approaches. Both candidates start moving toward the center. Their policy positions blur. Their language softens. By election day, a huge chunk of Americans complain that both candidates sound the same. That's not a coincidence. That's Hotelling's law running on a political system. The median voter is the beach. Both ice cream vendors are the candidates. Neither can afford to stay at the extreme end, because the other candidate will take the center and win. So both sprint toward the middle, and the people at the ends of the political beach feel like nobody is actually speaking for them. Hotelling predicted this in 1929, nearly 100 years before anyone was complaining about it on Twitter. Same thing with smartphones. When Apple released the first iPhone in 2007, it was genuinely different from everything else on the market. Within 2 years, every major phone manufacturer had moved toward the center. Touchscreen, App Store, camera, similar price points. By 2015, the joke was that you couldn't tell an iPhone from an Android in a blind test. Hotelling's law had consumed an entire industry and made every product look like every other product. You see the same pattern in airlines, banking, even breakfast cereal. Once you see the pull toward the center, you start seeing it everywhere, and it becomes very hard to unsee. Which leaves one important question. If Hotelling's law is this powerful, if it pulls competitors together, pulls politicians to the center, pulls entire industries into sameness, then why does any business ever try to be different? Because the businesses that resist the pull are the ones that actually win. Trader Joe's is a perfect example. It exists in a world where Walmart, Kroger, Whole Foods, and Costco all compete near the same mainstream center. Trader Joe's looked at that center and said, "We're going the other way."
Smaller stores, weird products, no brand names, no weekly specials, no loyalty cards. Every single decision Trader Joe's makes is a deliberate move away from the center of the grocery beach. And they generate more revenue per square foot than almost any other grocery store in America, more than Whole Foods, more than Costco. In-N-Out Burger operates in the most competitive fast food market in the world. They have fewer than 300 locations. They have never franchised. They have a menu with essentially 4 items. While every other chain was adding seasonal items, celebrity meals, app-exclusive deals, and loyalty programs, In-N-Out stayed exactly where they were, at the far end of the beach. Their revenue per location is among the highest in the entire industry. The rule works both ways. The center pulls, and it rewards everyone who goes there with survival. But the ends of the beach reward the businesses that resist with something rarer. They become irreplaceable. When every coffee shop looks the same, the one that looks different becomes the destination. So go back to those 3 Starbucks on the same block. Howard Schultz wasn't crazy. He was running the ice cream vendor calculation at global scale, and he was winning it. He got to the center of every major American city before his competitors could. He made Starbucks so unavoidable that the cluster became the brand. The car dealership row wasn't a coincidence, it was gravity. Each dealer making the individually rational decision to be where the customers already were, until the row became so dominant that no dealer could afford to leave. And Hotelling, sitting in an economics department in 1929, writing about beach vendors and ice cream, he was describing a force as fundamental as gravity, a rule that runs cities, elections, product design, airline schedules, and the layout of your nearest strip mall. You've been living inside this system your entire life. Now you can see it. And once you see the pull toward the center, you start understanding something much bigger. The most interesting things in business, in politics, in any competitive system, they almost never happen at the center. The center is where everyone is safe. The center is where everyone looks the same. The real moves, the ones that actually change things, almost always happen at the ends of the beach. At PopSavvy, that's what we do. We don't just tell you what's happening, we show you the invisible system underneath it. Once you understand the system, the world stops looking random. It starts looking designed, and designed things can be understood, and understood things can be used. If you want to keep seeing the world this way, you know what to do.